Now, have you ever dealt with outages? Have you had data centers go down? An availability zone crumble before your very eyes? What about a region-wide failure? They're events that happen. In fact, they get into the news. If there's a cloud outage that at the regional level, it's going to be a headline news item. And then people bemoan, what about cloud solutions? Do they really work? There is a very inherent bias in that because there's outages happening at individual data centers that aren't running in the clouds. The thing is the whole country doesn't see it happening. So the number of outages that are happening can be significantly higher with on-prem equipment. And it's something that I lived the experience of back when I worked at an earlier assignment before I came to Spring, before I came to Cockroach Labs. So the thing is, we're talking about the database you just can't kill. How do you deal with that? And before we get going, I want to say good morning or good afternoon to my buddy Felipe here. How's it going?
Hey, Greg, how you doing? Excited to be here with you, and of course, kind of excited to see what's going on with these. What is going to happen if I'm losing a region in my cockroach database, right? So,
It's a very real thing that's happening. We've heard from customers that have there's people running systems on mainframes that have been systems that have been running for 40 years, and it's kind of crazy if you think about it. And we've had a customer where they ran in dual configuration. They were also running a system on a CockroachDB cluster, and they were running it, and the data center went down. Okay, they had it spread between more than one data center. The data center went down. The mainframe went down. CockroachDB did not go down, and so that's a real testimony to the operability. And so that's why heck that's why I put it in the tagline of the show: the database you just can't kill. And so if you were coming here looking for a little thought provoking thumbnail, that was something I try to come up with a thumbnail before the show to draw your eye to it. And I just had this visual in my mind while I was driving around running errands of the dead emoji, whatever, going down here. And I thought, oh, that's the best way to capture it. So, what we're here to answer today is what happens when a region fails. Well, before we can go into a region level failure, that's a pretty massive thing. We have certain cloud providers have things like in the United States, we have the U.S. East region, the U.S. West region, a central region. You can go to Europe and find things like Europe East, Europe West, things like that. There's multi regions where there's just chunks of assets available to you. Now, it should be said that whenever you are setting something up, don't put, oops, I clicked the button here. Don't put two replicas in the same rack, okay? Let alone don't put them in the same server, the same physical box, because then there's no replication. If that server dies, you took out two replicas, and that was a false situation. But um, don't put them in the same server rack, because what if the power fails on the rack? So you need to spread it across data racks. But we're saying is you may want to spread that a little bit wider than that. So let's start off with an example here. Now, this is something that we're not into regions yet. We're just talking about, I've got this database cluster here. Now, there's a lot on this diagram, so we need to pause and kind of go over the bits and pieces here. So overall, we're running a database. This is a sample database that you get with CockroachDB called Mover Rides. It's a ride brokerage service. What a concept for a utility for an app that somebody may want. So there's this database that contains consistent data, ACID compliance, atomic consistent, um, isolated and durable. Okay, all the good stuff we want from a relational database, and it's kind of running everywhere. So that's what this particular thing you could say represents a table, whatever, that collects rides that people are taking. Now in CockroachDB, every table, everything is chopped up into contiguous chunks called ranges. And on this diagram, every range has a different color. Okay, so there's a purple range, there's an orange range, a light blue range, an orange range, and a brown range. Did I get them all? I think I did. Okay, and then the ranges are replicated. And if you look closely for any given color, you can see that there's three. So we have a replica count of three. So the table's been chopped up into ranges and it's replicated three times. And amidst every copy, there's a leaseholder, or sorry, amidst every set of replicas, every group of replicas is a leaseholder who's coordinating the updates for the replicas. Now that's the logical structure of the database. Now underneath it is the physical structure. And there we can count 9 gearboxes, okay? 9 little gear icons with a cockroach logo on it. These are the 9 instances of the cockroach binaries that are running. So we're running 9 copies of CockroachDB engine. We happen to have them spread across. Each one is in a different availability zone or a different AZ. And then the 3 of them are bundled into one data center. So we have US East 1, US Central 1, and US West 1. 3 regions. Each one of those has 3 AZs, and each AZ is running a separate instance of CockroachDB. And in this context, what CockroachDB does is I see 9 different locations, 9 different localities to tap into. It's going to take the ranges and the replicas and spread them all over the place and just spread them as wide as it can, kind of randomly. So they're all over the place in the sense that, so if any one single node goes down, CockroachDB can handle it. Now, it's a little crash course here. I brought a little handy implement here, so I just want to mention about what we're talking about here. So if you can imagine, how do we do updates here? So we talked about there's 3, actually, let me match it to the paradigm here. We have 3 replicas. So if we can imagine those 3 replicas, and one of them is the leaseholder, okay? We mentioned that. What that means is any update to this range has to get coordinated with the leaseholder. So it's going to come in here, and then the leaseholder is going to coordinate with the other 2. It's going to send out a message to each of them and say, I got an update coming, whether it's an insert, an update, a delete, what have you. And what it's looking for a majority quorum. So it's waiting for enough votes to come back to say, I've got 2 out of 3 quorum. So right away, it's going to say, I'm good. A little check mark on the leaseholder says, I'm ready to go. And to get 2 out of 3, it just needs 1 back. So whoever answers back first, if this one says, I'm good to go, we've got quorum. And so the update's allowed to continue. And then eventually the 3rd one will catch up or sync up using its RAF protocol. Okay. So that's how updates work. Okay. We can take our handy little iPad out of here now. So now what we're talking about so far is just basics. Okay. We have a multi-node database spread out and operating hunky-dory. Now what we can do is add a little bit more structure to how we're doing stuff here. Let's put me and Felipe off to the side here so we're not in the way. What we can do is take this database and apply what's called a regional configuration. We can make it a multi-regional database. And this is the first step into guarding ourselves against a region level failure, okay? Because that previous situation, if a whole region had gone out, there's a potentiality that because we had 3 nodes in every region, it's possible that one of those ranges, all 3 replicas could have been in the same region, okay? And if that region went out, the database is down. So if you're trying to guard against a region level failure, it's not enough. So we have these constructs here where we have some altered database operations, only we configure the region settings. And the first one we need to do is we need to pick what's the primary region. In this case, we're going to alter database and set primary region to US East. Now, US East is just a tactical name, or won't go into the specifics of the commands. We can look it up as to how it maps onto the topology. But basically, we're going to set a primary region for US East. We're going to set an additional region for US Central. And then finally, we're going to add a region for US West. And now, this is what our new database topology is going to look like. Now, you may remember on the previous slide, we had all kinds of ranges here. Sorry to get that a little dizzying. We had all these different colors. It makes it a little easier to visualize if we just focus on one particular range and what it does, okay? And in this case, let's focus on the light cyan color, I think the light blue colored one. I can never remember which color cyan is. So we're going to switch to this setup. So at the bottom of the diagram, we have the exact same nodes before. We have a US East 1 region, a US Central 1, and a US West 1 region. In each of those regions, we have 3 availability zones, and we have a CockroachDB node running in each one. This is sort of the virtual cloud equivalent of having a server running in a different rack or in a completely different data center, if you will. And then we have the 3 replicas. Now, in this case, if you look at the top of the diagram, there's some additional metadata that's been added. We have the US East, the US Central, and the US West regional designations have been added. And then there's an additional thing. The first command was we set a primary region. And when you go to a multi-region configuration, somebody has to be the primary region, okay? And we're going to talk about the impact that that has. So now earlier we had 3 replicas of everything because we decided in this setup our replica factor is 3, okay? So there's always going to be 3 copies. Now this happens to show an optimization that happens further on when you do this, but those 3 replicas, the leaseholder and its 2 replicas, they all essentially moved over to the primary region, okay? That's what happens by default when you set up a multi-region database. And I'm going to give you a sneak peek answer. This is not ready for a regional level failure yet. We're not there yet. But what happens is if you're and if you can't see, all the replicas have moved to the eastern region because this is the primary region that we picked. However, you may have somebody in the West Coast, an app that needs to access the data. So they need to be able to read it. And what they need is they need a copy of the data that's going to sync to them at all times. And that's what we call a non-voting replica. What you can do is you can create additional replicas that don't participate in quorum votes. I just showed on the diagram, if we put the diagram back up here, if you remember this, we had, updates coming into the leaseholder and coordinating with 2 other replicas. Essentially, in this configuration, non-voting replicas are additional replicas that are not part of any of this stuff, okay? So in that case, we've set up some non-voting replicas to deal with latency potentialities. So the first level of region level failure when we're doing this is we can handle a zone level failure or failure of an availability zone. And this is actually, I put the command up here on for display, alter database survive zone failure. It's explicit. I don't know. I kind of prefer making things explicit, but this is actually what the default configuration is. Whoop, thing flipped on me. So this is the default setting. When you add regions, you have a multi-region database. This is the default that it does. And let's go look at what happens when we have an outage. So if we have a zone level outage, if you have one zone failure, well, you're okay because again, we have 3 voting replicas here. There's one in the first availability zone, there's one in the second availability zone, and there was one in the third availability zone, but it's down. So it's not operational. Okay, so we have 2 out of 3 we're able to operate. So so far we've survived it. But what happens if you have a second zone failure in that primary region? Well, what happens is now that the 2 zones are down, you only have 1 voting replica, the leaseholder, and that takes the whole database down. Okay, so in a zone level survivability setup, you can survive 1 zone failure. You cannot survive 2 or more zone failures in that setup, not without additional configuration and handling. And I think I cloned that slide. I think I double cloned that. Okay, yeah, so if you zoom in here, now we have, oh yeah, the previous one just showed with 1 zone down, we were still good to go. We were able to make updates and affect change. But now that we have 2 out of 3 are down, we cannot, CockroachDB cannot operate in this context, okay? And that's not good. So this is where you're toast. And the thing is Greg, you said we're going to talk about region failures. So what the heck, Greg? Come on. So what is going on here? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to build up. This is the case for why maybe zone level failure is not sufficient? Well, this is what you have to decide. You have to go analyze and say, do I need zone level failure protection, or do I need region level protection failure? And what's the difference? Let's go back to our nice diagram that we had. If we remember that, again, let's go back to the thing before there was any failures when we had just set up a multi-region database. Again, we have East, Central, and West region designations. East is our primary region. All the voting replicas are in the Eastern region. And we added some non-voting replicas in the Central and Western region to deal with latency issues, okay? To make the performance better for clients that were in that area, okay? So we have this, and that is, remember, this is zone level survivability. Okay, you didn't see that. I'm going to flip back and forth. This is what happens when we have region level survivability. Now, this doesn't look like much of a difference here, but okay, look here, look real quickly, or look a little carefully. I don't want to make it quick. Okay, the 3 voting replicas are in the Eastern region, in the primary region. If I flip the slide to region level survivability, you'll notice there's suddenly 5 replicas. Nothing says non-voting. So in this configuration, we have a replica. We set it up with the default for user tables is a replica count of 3, but there's 5 replicas. CockroachDB did that automatically. It said, you're doing a region level. We need to make sure there's at least 2 copies in every, well, no, sorry. Let me back it up. It's a little complicated at first trying to put it into words, but once you realize it, it sort of makes sense. You can't survive a region level failure unless you have at least 3 regions, okay? Because that is, any one region can go down. So you need at least 3 regions. And in order to survive a region level failure that could take out potentially 2 replicas, you need a replica count of 5. So you need 3 regions at least and 5 replicas. That way, if you lose 2 replicas, there's still 3 left to go. And if you have 5 replicas and 3, it's going to be a 2-2-1 combination. Is that clear as mud? So in this sense, CockroachDB saw that we wanted a region level configuration. I think I forgot to put a slide in that shows the command for that. It's alter database. If I flip back to where we had the command here, so the command alter database survive zone failure, you soup it up and say alter database survive region failure. And CockroachDB is going to alert you as to whether or not there's enough regions there. And when you go to region level failure, Cockroach computes, well, with this many regions, in order to survive a zone of region level failure, this is how many replicas there have to be spread across. And it automatically bumps up the replica count to do what it needs to do. So at this point, it's sort of not listening to what you say on replica count. It's doing what must be done policy-wise to survive a region level failure. So with this setup, we have 2 replicas in the primary region. They're on different AZs. There's 2 replicas in the central region, and they're each on separate AZs. And then there's to fill it out to 5. There's a 5th replica in the western region. So this adds up to 5 replicas spread across the enterprise, but in a more strategic fashion. And it's going to go through and handle that. If we go back to our fun picture here. Now let's just clear all this out here. Let's clear it out. Okay. So now what we're talking about is we've got 1 leaseholder, and then we've got 2, 3, 4. Let's call this one the leaseholder. How about LH for leaseholder? Okay, so now we've got 5 copies here. So any request, if a request comes into this node, it's going to sit there and say, no, don't talk to me. You need to talk to this guy. This is the leaseholder. It's going to coordinate changes. So that's a big. Let's fix that. Okay. Here, okay. So the request comes in. Now, the leaseholder now knows replica count has been set to 5 by CockroachDB automatically. So it's going to say, out of 5, I need 3 in order to affect change. So, okay, I'm number 1. I know I've got the change, but it's going to send out the request to the other 4 replicas. And what it needs is it needs 2 more upvotes. So it's going to wait until it gets 2 more. And with that, it's going to say, good, the change can go through. And then finally, they're going to trickle back. They're going to catch up in one way. What happens is they either finally, they're actually processing the update and they just took a little longer and they send the message back. Or sometimes if a node gets out of sync, it can reach out to the leaseholder and say, I need to catch up. I need to sync up. So whatever it does, its RAF protocol handles that seamlessly on your behalf. And so it's going to catch up like that. And so in this context, this is the thing, when you get to region level, a multi-region database, and when you start doing stuff like, I want a replica count of this, I've got this many ranges. Your regional database could be spread across 5 regions, for example. You could extend into Europe, things like that. CockroachDB is able to add all that up and give you the right thing. So it's effectively moved us to a replica count of 5, but you can kick it up and say, I want a replica count of 9, something like that, and it will handle that. Now let's look at what happens if we have an outage. So imagine we had a regional level outage in the eastern region, and that's what we call our primary region. Now in this context, primary region is not as important. Okay. We can say in a multi-region, it may move there's different policies about where do the leaseholders live. In a zone level thing that we talked about earlier, all the replicas move to the primary region. In a region level survivability, but with a primary region policy, the leaseholders will live in the primary region. But there's also other policies you can apply. For example, you can have a follow the sun type model where the leaseholders will move to where most of the requests are coming in. So at the beginning of the day, if most of the requests are coming from, say, the eastern region, all the leaseholders can subtly move. They'll shift themselves eventually to the eastern region. But as traffic picks up, and towards the end of the day, when the people on the East Coast have gone home and there's no more traffic coming in from that end, but most of the traffic is on the West Coast, the leaseholders, as they go through their RAF protocols and they have elections periodically, like every few minutes, the leaseholders are going to trickle over and move to the West Coast. So there's different policies in how to deal with that. But in this situation, we had the eastern region went down, and in the eastern region, we had 2 replicas. So we lost 2, so we had 5, now we're down to 3 replicas. So all that has to happen is a new leaseholder gets elected, and it's picked from who's left behind, which is Central and West. In this case, one of the ones in the Central got to take over. And so this way, we've survived a region level failure. And that is good. That's what we wanted to happen. And this is how we deal with region level outages. So there are events that are going to happen. And so we need to deal with that. And what's kind of interesting in this is, so we kind of talked about how it goes, how you can sit there and pick your policy. It's not an all or nothing proposition. It's not like the entire database has to follow this strategy. You can sit there and say, you can do it, the whole database, you can easily say, I want that database, altered database, to have those directives that we were looking at earlier, and Felipe popped one up on the screen for us. But you can also configure it at the table level. So you can say, well, all the tables, don't have to be multi-region, but I want this table to have this particular regionality to it. It's vital that we do that. And there's some other configurations. You can also go to a regional by row. So it's possible to pick basically you're picking a key to divvy up the data to say, this is where CockroachDB gets into data domiciling and stuff, where it's like I can have the ranges created such that I need certain sets of rows to be on the West Coast, I need certain ranges of data to be on the East Coast, and this kind of thing. And we'll have to cover that in a different presentation. But I want to cover how we deal with these kind of outages. We can put this one back up there. I think this kind of captures it, these two pictures here. So, as a reminder, you can have a database. You can imagine sort of any topology you like. And this is why when you start up CockroachDB, you have to tell CockroachDB what the locality is, okay? Every node, you have to feed it this information saying what from top to bottom in a sense. Now if you look at this diagram from top to bottom, you need to read it from the bottom up. So the bottom right node that's in the US Eastern 1 and AZ3, you need to tell it it's in the US Eastern 1 region and it's in US 1 AZ3 availability zone. And you can even go down to the point of if this is if you're using a cloud solution. If you're using on-prem equipment, you've stood up 2 data centers. You need to give each of those a tactical name and put that in your locality as the top level. And then if you're racking and stacking servers, you need to tell it, which room it's in, which rack it's in, and which server it's in. So you're telling CockroachDB what's the physical layout of these devices, of where all the servers are. So that way CockroachDB knows it will do its best effort to spread stuff across the infrastructure and you don't accidentally end up with 9 copies of CockroachDB running in the same rack, because that doesn't help you if you have an outage. And if you have multiple data centers, you can make those regions. Now, you can use regions with your on-prem equipment. Now, we've talked a lot of stuff that's hinting at certain cloud providers, and there's some of these signatures. If you use the terminology of these cloud providers, then it fits very nicely onto it. But if you use the same paradigm with your own data centers, you can affect the same thing. So that's a really, really handy feature there. Now, one thing I want to let you know, if you want to play around with this a little bit, is you can go visit Cockroach University. If you go to university.cockroachlabs.com, there's actually an online course you can take where you can play around with it. Now, in the past, we've talked about it as a great way to get introduced to distributed SQL, to start playing around with application development with a real CockroachDB cluster. But there's also a course in there that covers this and some more content about multi-region support. So it's really a fun place to go, and I would get in there while you can, because right now the content is free, okay? We are rolling out some new training material, and I'm going to put this down here. Just put up me and Felipe. So we are rolling out a whole bunch of new content. We have a training page that we're putting together, and we're going to have new, refreshed, up-to-date content available. And as soon as that's available, we're going to start sharing that as our opportunity. And some of it's going to be free, and some of it's for our subscription base. So check it out if you want to get your hands on playing around with the database you just can't kill. You got any questions there or comments, Felipe?
Yeah, just to remind our audience that yes, we have the university CockroachLabs.com. Take a look into our content, and as Greg said, we are going to start having public training very soon too. So we're going to start in June, practically next week. So I think it's going to be in the middle of June, right? From the 15th. So take a look into our homepage at CockroachLabs.com, and you're going to find all the information, the new classes that we are going to give like every day. It's going to be a group, taking those classes. Just talk to your manager, talk to your your boss, right? If you are interested in taking this training that we're going to do like a live, is going to be like a very, very advanced. And of course, there are going to be different levels, but we're going to start from beginning all the way to advanced. Not only CockroachDB like that, but also how to connect, how to integrate your applications practically. I can say you're going to have 3-4 hours of entire material, plus you have a small time of consultancy, I can say, right? So you can ask all these questions like, hey, I want to actually start connecting and start receiving some, for example, some events that is what is happening behind the scenes on CockroachDB. And of course, you are we're gonna help you with that, and we're gonna give you kind of the walkthrough what you need to do, right? So again, take a look into our CockroachLabs.com website. Take a look into the University Cockroach, CockroachLab.com. Take a look into the content. Right now it's free. And yeah, we're going to start adding, again, more content, more things are coming. And yeah, this is very exciting moment, right? So let me share with you too, like I'm doing a particular training with our fellow co-workers, and we are doing new material that Greg already rolled out, like how to restore CockroachDB, how to do a backup and restore, right? So it's very interesting how you can do that. We're talking about snapshots and a recurring point in time, incremental backups, going into the whole backup cluster, doing incrementals, scheduled backups, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very interesting on how CockroachDB actually manage everything, right? So again, just pay attention on our website. Very soon we're going to have those rollouts, and we're going to start doing public classes, right? So
all right, awesome. So don't forget, hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell, and we will see you in the next episode.
This episode is over, but your learning has just begun. Visit CockroachLabs.com to find all kinds of content to expand your knowledge.